Hello everyone from Istanbul School. Dear viewers, our studio guest this week to talk about our traditional understanding of religion is Prof. Dr. Mustafa Said Yazıcıoğlu. Welcome, teacher.
You're welcome.
How are you?
Thank you. How are you guys doing?
Thank you. Haja, we would like to talk a little bit about our traditional understanding of religion. There is a traditionalism on the one hand and the chase for religion in the modern world on the other. How should we interpret these? How should we ensure this integration? What do you say about this subject?
We can make an introduction like this. When we consider the Islamic world in general, we see that there are two different main understandings. We see that there are some discussions around two basic axes. One of them is our ulama. They have studied, struggled, labored, and made efforts on many issues in the past. They left us a collection of jurisprudence. Therefore, we do not need to focus on those works again. If we know where to find what, we can look at that vast collection and find what we are looking for. This understanding is one. Secondly, of course, any objection may come to this understanding, and it knows how to come. The second understanding is that it is necessary to present some new interpretations according to the conditions of the age. Therefore, religion is a dynamic thing. It is a divine communication that constantly conveys rules regarding every stage of human life. People experience many difficulties throughout history. They go through many stages. Many innovations enter our lives. Therefore, we need to be able to make an interpretation about these and also bring expansions and interpretations that will enable people to live their religion very comfortably, peacefully, and happily. There is usually a conflict between these two understandings. This is the case in the entire Islamic world. Since our country is a part of the Islamic world, there is more or less such an atmosphere, such a situation in our country. A religious understanding that is based on fiqh is perceived as a traditional understanding. Let's define it that way. The other understanding is about being able to produce new interpretations and new perceptions that are suitable for today's conditions without rejecting that fiqh and by making use of it.
You say religion does not equal jurisprudence.
It is not. Because what we call fiqh is a set of solutions that some scholars who lived in those times, centuries ago, some scholars who worked on this subject, thought about and reached according to the needs of that time, according to the knowledge of that time, according to its sociology, psychology, and economic conditions. They also have a value for us, but they do not guide us. They do not dominate us, because the conditions of that time and the conditions of this time are very different. If a solution produced in that time works for us today, we will take it, no problem. But if it does not, if we take the thought of that time, the solution put forward by that time, and bring it to the present, we will take people back 4 centuries.
Okay, so are you saying that such a selection is necessary in every era?
No. Instead of elimination in every era should be able to produce its own interpretation, its own solution, according to its own requirements, according to its own conditions. Now think about it this way. The Quran tells us, don't you think, don't you look, don't you see, don't you take a lesson. In other words, we will think about what happened, weigh it, and put forward an interpretation about them. We will come up with solution suggestions. Now we will go through this for a period. Let's say that centuries ago, the scholars of that period did this. They left behind a very valuable collection. That duty does not fall on us by doing it. In other words, that duty is an obligation on everyone, because every century, every period has its own troubles, obligations. We encounter many issues that need to be opened up to people. We need to do it justice. In other words, this was their duty. They did it. After that, we are now relaxed. It is not up to us to do such a thing. We will take something out of what was done and open the way for ourselves. The understanding is not a correct understanding. This won't get us anywhere.
So there is a collection that has been done. Instead of saying, let's leave it aside and live our religion, you are talking about a constantly updated process. Exactly.
That is, we do not reject it. It sheds light on how the scholars of that period reasoned and how they reached a solution, but it does not bind us. If we can get something with what we get from there, we should sit down on today's problems and produce new solutions on our own, just like they did, with the same effort and in that respect. If we stick to that, we will have gone there. You cannot take people back 3, 4 centuries.
So who will do this today? Will we leave it to the Directorate of Religious Affairs or to the congregations or to the big names who will have their say in every era? To whom should we leave this task, or should we all do it together?
So, of course, there is not just one addressee for this. Of course, since it is a religious issue, first of all, the theologies, the Directorate of Religious Affairs theologies are looked at. Because in a religious issue, there is a new vision will be made or a new opening will be made. Of course, there are leading institutions, but this is everyone's business. It is everyone's business who thinks. It is also the business of an economist. You will say, what does an economist have to do with it? No solution has been reached on the subject of interest. Many things are being said. Let me say this in parenthesis. It would be a bit unfair to expect a solution from the Directorate of Religious Affairs or theology on the subject of interest, because religion has a ruling on this subject. The Quran forbade riba. But does the riba that was prohibited back then coincide with today's interest, and to what extent does it coincide? In order to sort out all these, the economic dimension of the matter also comes into play.
We need common sense.
Exactly then, economists will also contribute to this issue. On the other hand, the stages that this interest issue has gone through in the historical process will be expressed, and thus a result will emerge from a blending. In other words, I said this as an example. It is the same in many issues. A sociologist needs to be involved, a philosopher needs to be involved, a psychologist needs to be involved. In other words, it should be a summary of the products of the period, a summary of them, because every solution definitely has a sociological, psychological aspect, a human aspect. Therefore, every thinker, it is something that everyone will put their hands under. This does not necessarily mean that everyone will think about it. In other words, it can be the product of an effort that will be put together and presented by those who are at the forefront of the work, while producing these solutions by also making use of such research.
Of course, the understanding of education is not the same as before. In other words, there are no longer people who can produce solutions to many different problems together as there used to be. Everyone is different. They focus on their own areas of expertise and focus on one area and continue their work. It is not possible for a scholar to continue his education and study in many different areas as it used to be. For this reason, you think that all areas should find support from each other and maybe find a common solution.
That's exactly right. There are many specialized micro-level studies in every field. In other words, we need to make use of all of these in some way and use the data brought by today's science to pave the way for people. We need to relax people. Religion is a field that gives peace and serenity to people when you enter it, but it has come to such a point that when you enter it, you find yourself in a conflict, something.
We feel fear and anxiety instead of feeling that serenity and comfort. I think that is why young people see it this way, either on my own behalf or as a result of my observations. Maybe we can talk a little more about the perspective of young people here. You may also have observations as an academic at a university. The current perspective of young people on religion, as it should be interpreted, seems to consist of more anxiety, worry, and fears around them rather than such serenity, happiness, and inner peace. How do you see this situation?
This is a very accurate observation. The way young people look at things and approach them is very different. Sometimes there is a generational distinction, this generation, that generation, Generation X, Generation Z, etc. So it is not very correct to categorize them like this. In other words, if you say Generation X, Generation Z, Generation Y, a perception like we are from this generation, the requirements of this generation are like this, like that may arise. What is important is that young people can adopt some of our behaviors that stem from religion and morality. One of the most important elements of this is that young people need role models. Everyone needs them, but young people need them more. In other words, when they look at them, they need people who they will admire, whose style and manner they will be impressed by. These are also decreasing. Therefore, the incredible development of these communication tools can lead young people to very different searches. With a simple mobile phone, they follow what is happening all over the world. Therefore, they are also affected by them. If their hardware and infrastructure are not strong, it also leads to negativities. But here, we need to find ways to reach young people. The language of religion needs to be a little more differentiated. Unfortunately, our religious language does not change much. We continue to express ourselves as if we are addressing the mosque community at a certain level. However, we also need to look for ways to reach the youth. Let me tell you something typical. Sometimes we suddenly discover how valuable people are after they die. I won't mention names now. When a statesman or a bureaucrat passes away, so many good things are told about him. If we could tell these things while he is alive, if he is a role model for the youth, if the youth knew that there is such a person there, how great a person he is, if they could gather a little more information about him, go meet him, talk to him, try to be like him, it would be much better. In other words, this is an important issue. When a person is alive, their value is not appreciated. After they die, their value is appreciated. Memoirs are written about them, etc. Honoring people while they are alive, taking them as role models and bringing them to the forefront will probably shed light on this issue we are talking about.
Yes, maybe we can present this as one of the solutions. As you said, it is really a very important issue, my teacher. In other words, it is very important for people to be role models in their health, to shed light on the youth, and to benefit from these. Of course, we will understand them well after they pass away, but as you said, maybe we need to consider this as one of the solutions. Another time, it may even be a subject that we need to examine in more depth. Apart from this, my teacher, what we call the language of religion is actually a bit of a separation. In other words, while it is an issue that we need to adopt in every area of life, leaving the youth aside in a way, or even leaving religion aside and actually being in the middle of life, religion is seen as something that is on the sidelines with a different language and in a different dimension. In order to include this a little more into life, to bring the language into life, maybe we can do this with examples. Maybe what path should be followed here?
Of course, this is also a very important issue. In other words, religion is life. Religion is in the living life. In other words, in our religion. There are many things about human life from birth to death, about the adventure of life. They set rules. The main thing is to adapt them to today's conditions in a way that young people can understand, and to integrate them into life. Let me tell you an anecdote. During the presidency of religious affairs, these cartoons were we had entered our agenda intensively. In the face of these, children are also very interested in them. We had embarked on something at that time. We attempted to make a cartoon and made a few series. It was very difficult at that time. They were probably drawn with a pencil. We did something that could guide our children spiritually. That was a beginning. I don't know exactly what happened after that. Now, the same thing is valid for today. There are incredible things that children follow on YouTube and other platforms today. The varieties have increased. Children's interests have changed. Something needs to be done to protect children from the damage that all this will cause. In other words, something new needs to be produced. Sometimes we do it in a slapdash manner. That doesn't mean much either. In a very refined way. They also require effort. They require effort in this regard. In other words, people should also take a little interest in these issues. In other words, we only have famous things in this regard, such as other series and so on. But we need to present those role model people that we just mentioned to young people, maybe in those TV series as well, in a natural way to people, children, young people.
So this cartoon part is still going on as far as I can see. I see that cartoons are used a lot in order to explain and show religion to children from life or other moral issues related to life, such as the refugee issue. Because it is much more effective for children to see the state that everyone accepts in a cartoon, in addition to this division they see in society. However, this does not seem to be possible for young people. Of course, it is necessary to show this a little more with social media or the content they watch. But there are a lot of series. I don't want to get too off topic, but I see these divisions as creating a negative perspective rather than a positive one with these series that they see and are affected by. What do you say about this?
There are so many opportunities in the hands of young people. They can watch series, even series on their mobile phones. They can watch certain videos, things that deal with a certain subject. In other words, it is not easy to capture this diversity in every field and put it into practice. It is difficult. That is why the religious education that children will receive in due time is also very important. In other words, children need to have a foundation. When I mentioned some concepts, I mentioned it with a bit of that in mind. In other words, if we explain religion to children in the way we did 50 years ago, we cannot make much progress. Let me start from here. We have explained religion in terms of worship. In other words, prayer is an important worship. We have emphasized it so much that, of course, it needs to be emphasized, but we have finally reached the following conclusion. In other words, when we pray, we take care of the work. This is not it. Prayer and other worships are a form of relationship between Allah and the servant, In other words, it is a way of expressing the gratitude that people feel towards the Creator for the endless blessings that Allah has given to people. His account is between Allah and the servant. It does not concern the second or third person.
Not the social part, but the individual part, actually, exactly.
Now, the real issue is that if a person has taken on a responsibility in the public sphere, in the social sphere, she must do it justice. In other words, she must do that job perfectly. Merit and competence are already laid down by him, her. Merit and competence is a principle set forth by the Quran. In other words, a job must be given to the person who will do it best, so that people can benefit from the work she does. Therefore, this side of the job is lagging a little. Why is it lagging? In other words, since we focus so much on a certain act of worship, it is as if we have more or less completed the task once we have performed that act of worship. Then comes this. We have holy days and nights, holy nights, and it is explained there that if we worship until the morning that night, all our sins are forgiven. In other words, there is no such gathering.
In fact, we see it as a ritual of confession.
Exactly. So what happens when you sleep until morning and worship or pray here and there? This is always a behavior that a person will do from time to time in their daily lives. Praying to God and asking for forgiveness. When you reset, the person comes out in the middle, this time with a 0. In the meantime, he starts some negative things again, because he will come again in a month. He will come again in a month. After that, with the Umrah visits, as if he goes to those places, an understanding has settled in our people as if he is reset. This is not true. In other words, whether it is Hajj or Umrah, it is one of the basic conditions of Islam. You go there and see them, you remember the time of a prophet, you see the struggles there, you get something deep inside, that's it. Other than that, I wipe out everything else. The other side of the business is that we have kept the public sphere to the side a little. However, the real big responsibility is there. The other side is also a big responsibility. In other words, I do not want to create a perception that we are belittling worship here. Worship is the basis of religion, but it is individual. It is something between the person and Allah. It does not harm or benefit a third party. However, if we consider that the work done is negative and that if that work is given to incompetent hands, many people will be harmed by it, we understand how heavy a responsibility it is. In other words, we have neglected this side of the business a lot. This side is generally the moral and social dimension of the business.
Then let's close with a quote from Ismet Ozal, sir. Let's remember a quote from Ismet Ozal about getting caught up in the formal aspects of this religion and not being interested in its jurisprudence. In this country, eating haram food has not attracted as much attention as eating with the left. Let's close like this if you want. Thank you very much for your contributions. Dear viewers, Prof. Dr. Mustafa Said Yazıcıoğlu was our guest. See you in the next program. Goodbye.